to the Astroimaging channel. It's good to have you. We're going to have a really good show today. A few months back, I was surfing the internet and I found out about Kevin. I saw some things, websites and social media and things like that. And I said, ooh, this guy has been in astroimaging for 3 or 4 years, and he's already doing stuff that would make most of us pretty proud. And, I checked out some of the things he was doing, and it's pretty interesting, really. So I thought, I'm going to invite him and see if he could come on over here and tell us about what he's been doing. And he said, yeah. And I'd like to do that for more of you. All right. I got to share my screen here, and I'm going to point. And let's see. Come on. Here we go. I don't usually do that. Let you see my whole screen. I usually start off the day by getting rid of my desktop icons and then take it from there. Let's go to the TAIC, the astroimagingchannel.org main screen. There's 2 things I want to tell you about today. The first thing is Orion time. We are still collecting images for Orion. Anything taken in Orion or Orion as a whole, please submit your images. The way you submit your images is by coming down here and clicking to submit the file. When that happens, it'll open up your email program, and you write me a little note that says, hey, here's my image of Orion, or here's my M42, or here's the running man, or here's the horsey, or whatever it is. I do ask that you make it at least 1080 pixels on one side or another. That means it's going to be big enough so that it doesn't start pixelating and things like that. If you don't have 1080, that's okay. Set what you got, and we'll do it best we can with it. The more size we've got, the less problems we have getting it done right. Tell us what your email, of course, comes with it, equipment, any comments you want to make. And we'll put this all together and make up a little show for you. Your deadline is February 7th, Super Bowl Sunday, so please get it in there. As always, I like talking about the calendar, and you can see that we've got a pretty full calendar coming up. Adam Block's going to be here next week. He's going to talk about some things that can screw you up in PixInsight, and how to avoid them, and how to save some time with them and things like that. Adam's always a good presenter, and I hope you're back next week. And then remember a couple of weeks back, we were talking about transient events down in Texas. Well, Stephen Hummel is from the McDonald Observatory is going to be over here, and he's going to be telling us about how to take some pictures of some of those events. And then we have a Sunday off because somebody's going to be playing football, and it's kind of the American dream and stuff like that. So we're all going to be watching somebody play football. And then we've got a whole lot of other events coming up. But we do have empties. I think March 28th, we got an empty. April 11th, we've got an empty. And after April 25th, we're empty. We need you guys to push the contact button and sign up. Tell us that you want to do a show. The Astroimaging channel is not magic. It depends on people volunteering to help out, including presenting. And you may think that I'm not nearly as advanced as you guys on the Astroimaging channel. Honest, I know these people. They're not that advanced, okay? You've got some things in your head that you can share with other people that will help them, and it would become a popular show. Now, there's one other thing that we introduced last week, the program database, and I think that's over here. And it's got a list of all the programs. It's kind of hard to keep track. We've got 300 and some programs out there, and it's kind of hard to keep track of what there is for everybody to see. But we've tried to put some data together and make it a spreadsheet. You can download that spreadsheet. When you try to open with Google Sheets, and you can open with Google Sheets, you can view, but you can't edit the program. We would like to give permission to some people to edit the program. if you read, you'll notice that only the last year's worth of programs have actually been annotated fully. The rest of them are included here with their links and the dates and the titles and things like that. But if you watch a program and you see it and you say, "Hey, that's pretty good. I like that idea," and you want to write a couple of lines about it, so we can annotate it, we can add it to it. Down here at the bottom, volunteers needed. Volunteer to help with the program database. Click on that. It calls up your email program, and you can tell us what you've done to edit the web sheet, the worksheet here, and we can add it to the file. The more we get edited into that file, the more useful that thing will be in the long run. At any rate, we've got lots of ways to visit our old programs, and so you're welcome to come on over to Program Database and help us look for that kind of stuff. Okay, that's enough of the introduction, and I think probably by now everybody who's out there is going to be out there. We've got lots of people already over here joining us in the conversation, and we recommend highly that you do something to join us in the conversation. Okay, you say hi, say hey, tell us what the weather's like, and ask your questions as you go along. When you ask a question, put a big red question mark in, right, like that one right there, and it'll help us find stuff. Please subscribe. If you haven't yet subscribed, we've got what, 10,200 some subscribers, and that's nice. There's a button around here someplace, I don't see it right now, to make contributions and things like that. And of course, like the programs. It's always good to like the programs. With all that, I think that's enough introduction. Let's hear from Kevin. Kevin, tell us about your astroimaging journey, would you? Start sharing your screen and take it from there.
All right. Thank you all for inviting me. That was a surprise to get that email from you, Alex. I appreciate that. And I've watched your show a few times, so I do have a little bit of experience. Things from especially Star Tools, which was, I think, one of your early shows when you guys first started. All right, so hopefully you guys can see my screen coming up here. There we go. All right, so as Alex said, I'm Kevin Francis, and just wanted to take an opportunity to walk through my very short 3 to 4 year astrophotography journey, which includes a lot of DIY related stuff. And along the way, I've got some tips that I can give you from my experience, what I've learned, and hopefully this helps you and as you're going forward in your journey as well. It's for me, it's been fun, and it continues to be that. So I'm never disappointed in any of my photos. I think you'll see that as we go along. There's some photos that don't look the greatest, but I love them, and I'm just happy to be able to get a picture of something in the night sky you just can't normally see with your own eyes, right? So what I've done is I've broken my journey down into 7 little phases. So that, okay, it's kind of a interesting breakdown, but I do want to go through, how I started, some smartphone astrophotography, prime focus astrophotography, then get into 3D printing, which I think is within the hobby. About what I've done for polar alignment. Then I've got the robotic telescope experience that I wanted to bring to bear to the conversation as well. And then I'll end it up with last year, how things went for me there. So let me get started here with the beginning. I'll pause as we go if you've got any questions. Tonight. Okay, so in the beginning, in my younger days, my parents got me that Bushnell telescope that I think a lot of you may have had with the wooden legs and all that good stuff. And I viewed mostly the moon with it and a few stars here and there, but most of the time it just sort of sat in my room. Didn't really get much use out of it because, well, it could only do but so much with that telescope. But I've always had a passion for space, and my parents would tell you that I was probably born with that. I'm always looking up. I'm always trying to understand what's there. What am I looking at? Is that a planet? Is that a star? it's a bright light, and everybody can see the moon, everybody can see the sun. Well, not directly, uh, but you know, those are obvious things that you can see. So, I've always been fascinated with it. And then about 2015 or so, I got into the outreach side of things, and I joined the Virginia Living Museum, and I opened up their Abbott Observatory in Newport News, Virginia, usually on the weekends. And it was a joy actually to see patrons who would come to the museum and find their way up to the observatory, and we 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 pull out a telescope and we're looking at sunspots, or it's a star party and we're looking at Saturn for the first time, or for a lot of them, and Jupiter for the first time, and the expressions of joy that they give you during those moments are really uplifting, and it's one of the things that drive and continue to push me forward in this hobby. So from there, you know, hey, I'm always using their telescopes, and I got rid of my old Bushnell, and I said to myself, I need to get another telescope, and I just want to actually start looking at a little more than just what I get to see at the museum. And so I bought a Orion Astroview 6 telescope. And again, I started in visual at that point in time. I bought some eyepieces right along with it, and I spent just sitting outside and looking at different parts of the night sky, getting used to, you know, putting in the different color filters and seeing what they do and things like that. One day I got this little urge to stick my smartphone up to the eyepiece and see what I get. So before I get into that part of it, though, I do want to say this: if you're getting started in astrophotography and you don't have any equipment, don't go this route and start with visual first. Spend some time out there looking on YouTube or other places and see what other people are doing, what kind of equipment they have. It's a really great place to start, because this hobby you can spend a lot of money in this hobby. I'll say that. So if you don't have deep pockets, a good and astrophotography is where you want to go. Start there first before you go buying a telescope. But needless to say, I went ahead and did visual first. And so when I finally got the itch to start taking a lot of pictures in astrophotography, I started off with the one camera that I had readily available to me at the time, which was my smartphone. At the time, it was a Google Pixel, the really blue one. Yeah, I just stuck it up there, and I took a picture. And the first one I wanted to take was Andromeda. I think that's probably a common number one target for a lot of astrophotographers is Andromeda. We're going to take a picture of that. So that's what I did. The reality is it didn't look like the last photo. It looked like the one here on the left there. And I love this photo because it's the first photo I took for that reason. I spent some time afterwards trying to verify, did I actually take a picture of Andromeda? And really all you can see here with what I did that very first time is the core of Andromeda, not much else. But it was enough. It was enough to say, I'm hooked and I'm going to take this as far as I can go. So as you can see on the right, later on, I've taken pictures with a different camera with the Canon T3i. So very, very different quality of work. But again, for me, it doesn't compare to the first one because, again, it's the first one. All right. So that's the beginning. About smartphone astrophotography here is, you know, what did I learn by using that Google Pixel to take photos during that time frame, which was probably 5 to 6 months out of a year. Just smartphone up to that telescope and taking pictures. And so you actually can get some really detailed photos with um, smartphone technology. Of course, I had a Google Pixel at the time, but others using the Apple phones or even Samsung phones, they had a little more features than I did. And so my um, Google Pixel, it limited me in terms of, you know, how long of an exposure that I could take. I think it was zero 0.6 seconds, I think, max on that phone. And so I wasn't able to go very far, very long in terms of long exposure, anything. So, but getting pictures of the moon with it was perfect, right? 0.6 seconds is probably a good starting point for someone who doesn't know anything about, how long you should expose the moon or anything like that. That works great. Since then, since I had that phone, Google's come out with its own astrophotography mode on their camera, on their phones and their cameras, and it does a really good job. But so here, as you can see, I've taken some photos here of Jupiter, the sun, and there's a really small sunspot there, and here's the moon with some Earth shine, which was an interesting. It came out nice from cell phone, so I thought that was pretty cool. Now there's a couple of apps that you can use to take these pictures, and I'm only going to give you two at this time, but there's plenty more if you wanted to do the research. But Camera VF5 is the one that I use, and there's Nightcap out there for iOS. And in the beginning, when I first started using those apps, or Camera VF5, again, you could only go so far as the camera on the phone would allow you to go. So 0.6 seconds was about it. And I could do any number of ISO changes, so that worked out great. But here recently, they've actually upgraded it to where you can take longer exposure photos with that software or that app on your phone. So I haven't used it much because I don't go back and I haven't done too many cell phone or smartphone pictures in recent years. But I did try it out because I was helping someone understand how to set it up on their phone. And that's where I learned that they've actually grown, and they've got some more features on these apps. Now, pros and cons of doing smartphone astrophotography. Again, it's the fastest way to get into it if you're starting out. All right, if you've got a telescope that you can very quickly come in contact with, for example, go to your local library, so to speak. I worked at the Virginia Living Museum, so they had for $10 you can rent a telescope, and they've got some really nice telescopes there. And so, yeah, you can go pull the telescope out of the library or any one of these other locations, put your smartphone on it, and you've got some photos. And even while showing patrons sunspots, for example, at the Virginia Living Museum, or even during star parties, it's always cool to allow the patrons to put their smartphone up to the eyepiece and take a photo. So it's really, that's a pro. It's really cool to use. It's easy to pull out your pocket and go with that. And you've got some photos. The downside is there's a limited quality of photo that you can create with a smartphone. But you're starting out, so I'm not sure. If you're ready to, like I said in the beginning, if this is what you want to do and you're starting out, you're probably not going to start out with your smartphone. You're probably going to buy a dedicated astronomy camera. So there's those are the choices you would make going forward with that. Any questions so far?
No, we're good so far. We generally have some conversations going on, and everybody did the same thing you do and fell in love with their first astro image. I should
Okay,
just tell you that. Okay, and
good.
remember, we all go to mute when we're just watching. So if you ever
Yep.
ask us, "Does everything go all right?" and it takes us 3 or 4 seconds to reach up and unmute and answer you, don't worry, we're still there. Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
No
but there'll
problem.
be a gap. Okay.
Good. All right. So just a few more pictures that I've taken with my smartphone. And one of the other ones here that I like here is the Mercury photo. This was sort of an accidental find one night that I was out in my parents' backyard and setting up my telescope. And I actually looked west, and I was like, what is that? That's bright in the sky. It's not even fully dark yet. So I turned my telescope and popped my camera on there, or my cell phone on there, and snapped a few photos. And later on, went back and figured out what it was. So pretty happy with that. For the moment, I'm going to try and take that photo opportunity. And I've even been able to, with the Coronado, been able to get a little bit of a solar prominence there that you can see in that sun photo there, and went deep sky with one of the brighter objects you can take with the Orion Nebula as well. And moon they're pretty standard, I think, for most people to want to go after those first. And everybody knows those for the most part, so we'll do that. So yeah, and Orion Nebula I thought was pretty cool. Be able to at least get the trapezium in there, and it's not bad, I think, I would say. All right, so that was smartphone astrophotography. So then I want to get into prime focus astrophotography. So if you haven't noticed, or if you have done this before and you know that it's sort of a rabbit hole in this hobby, you're going to end up spending a lot of money because you want to get deeper and deeper into space, or you just want or you're trying to get that APOD quality photo, and there's a cost that comes with that, right? So I'm starting with the prime focus astrophotography piece is me starting to get into that phase of saying I want more, I want better photography, I want better photos. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of money to do it. And I'll tell you what I did during that time frame to kind of figure that out. It does involve 3D printing. So one of the one of the difficulties, and I think a lot of you probably have seen this as well, is how do I know I'm focused? And so when I ran across online a Batinoff mask, I was like, okay, well, I need to buy one of those. And okay, they're relatively inexpensive in general, but at the time where I was working, we were doing a lot of continuous improvement activities with 3D printing. And so I said, why not? Let's try a 3D printer on these and see if I can create a Batinoff mask. So that worked out great even with the smartphone. And then knowing that I was moving into a DSLR camera, which is listed here as well, I knew I had to get myself a motor drive. So the Orion AstroView 6 mount, it doesn't have a motor. It's not a go-to mount. So you've got to turn it, right? And so if you want to do longer exposures, well, you've got to have something that's tracking the movement of the Earth or tracking the night sky. And that's going to allow you to do, longer exposure photos that you don't have to do the 500 rule calculation on. So I had to purchase one of those. The DSLR camera, so I went and I got one of those, and immediately, as you can see, I got on the next one here, a 3D printed T-ring adapter that I did as well. I put both of those together, put it on my Orion AstroView 6, and off mask on there, and I could never get it focused. It was the most difficult, painful experience that I went through, and I went through that experience because I didn't ask enough questions along the way. Right, so I didn't have someone in my corner who was going to turn to me and say, "Well, that telescope is only made for visual, and you just can't pop a camera on it and be successful with it. It's not like putting the smartphone on the eyepiece and getting a photo out of it." So another 3D printing change. Um, a lot of research went into, how can I get this mount? I mean, this OTA, this telescope, to work with the DSLR camera. And I didn't want to cut it. I didn't want to buy another telescope. That just my choices. And so I kept trying to figure this out, and a lot of the message boards and other resources were saying, hey, you need to cut off the back of the telescope so you could move that primary mirror forward, or you need to get a low profile focuser, and you're gonna have to drill holes because it's not made for your OTA. So I really didn't like that damaging opportunity. So what I did, I took it apart because I am an engineer, mechanical engineer, and sort of decided I'm going to look at this thing and see what I can see and see what I learn. And I figured out that I can replace the holders of the mirror with a 3D printed piece that will push the mirror in 25 millimeters. I believe that was the number I used. And after I did that, that's the picture you see here. This is the first photo I was able to get with that Orion AstroView 6 using those 3D printed holders for the mirror, which worked out great. And for me, I enjoyed this next phase of my, let me back up a little bit now that I see my friend Chuck here. This is Chuck. He owns a camera shop in Hampton, Virginia. And I went to him to get the Canon XTI camera. At the time, I didn't know what camera I was going to end up with. And I went to him and I said, "Do you have any, refurbs or anything that you're getting rid of, or damaged or broken cameras?" And he said, "Well, I'm always getting them refurbished, and I've got a bunch over here, but here's one that the memory card doesn't work." I said, "That's fine. I don't need the memory card to work. I'm plugging this into a computer. Does the USB work?" "Yep, it does." So he's like, "It's yours. Take it." All right, cool. So after getting it to work through that uh, process I just discussed, I actually took a picture of Orion and brought it back to him on Canvas, which he still has hanging in his shop. So I enjoy having some collaboration with others who are willing to help. I think anything you do where you've got people in your corner and they're either moving the same direction as you, or some point in time you're aligned and you're able to work well with each other. It's good to give to one another. So he gave me a camera. I did go back and buy another camera from him later, but I also wanted to give him that photo, and he really liked that. So keep that in mind as you're going through your journey. That the people that will help you, and work with them. I have one of my coworkers as well during that time frame. He helped create the D-sub cable for that camera to work with my laptop. So his name is Kane, and he's actually also instrumental in a lot of the 3D printing that I'll discuss later in this presentation. So like I said, I did get the XTI camera from him, and it worked great. I got, like I said, many photos using that. I learned a lot early on, starting off with some of the apps like Astrophotography Tool, just trying to get experience with it, trying to watch as many YouTube videos as I can to understand how to utilize that tool, Astrophotography Tool, APT, with the camera that I had, with the telescope. And there was a lot to try to understand at that time for me. So him helping me out with the camera and all of that was really good. From a pros and cons standpoint, in this particular situation for me, using the 3D printed piece and having it work so successfully, I can take that out and put the original pieces back in, and I could use that telescope for visual. I can sell it. So that's a really good pro for me. So not having to cut it, which is a permanent thing. Once you've cut that OTA, that's it. It's stuck doing what it's doing at that point in time. For me, the downside that I'm not too afraid of, but if you're not careful, you can damage your primary mirror. You can scratch it. Of course, it didn't scare me, but if you're interested in doing that and moving forward in that direction, or if you're in that position, and it doesn't scare you, by all means, the 3D printed pieces can work for you. But if you're not comfortable, I recommend not doing it and looking for another avenue to achieve your goal. So with that,
Kevin, let me interrupt you here.
yep, go ahead.
We've got a show coming up, I think April 25th. I'd have to check, but about 3D printing. Graham Hayes, who's been here before,
Yes.
is going to come on over, and he's going to show us what he's learned about 3D printing and how to make parts for your imaging train and all that kind of stuff. Tells us the do's and the don'ts and what he's learned, and he's made some mistakes for us, so we don't have to make them. But that's, I think, April 25th. Graham Hayes.
Okay, excellent. So I'll make sure I watch that, and maybe provide some input to that as well, because I've made some mistakes as well. So now I've actually helped others who have found my blog or found my post related to this, because I do share, just like we're doing here today. And so one of the opportunities you have, if you don't have a 3D printer, the local libraries have them. Maybe not all of them, but I do know where I live back in Newport News, Virginia, that the main library there, they had a 3D printer, and for less than $1, you can go get this thing printed. So there's many different ways you can get a lot of these parts 3D printed. There's online services as well, a little more expensive, um, but they are available. Kane, who I was telling you about earlier, my coworker, he turned me on to a site called tinkercad.com, which is where you don't need anything but a login ID. You can go in there and you can design anything your heart contents or defines is necessary for your anything for your hobby. What you see here over to the left is a 3D printer. It's actually printing a COVID mask early last year when masks were in short supply. A bunch of that as an additional job for the printer, so to speak. But again, they're available all over, and using Tinkercad, you can see they've got a few companies that are linked to that, and you can send your design off to them, and they'll print it for you and send it to you. So one of the really nice things about 3D printing, it's fast for prototyping. If any of my 3D printed parts fail for one reason or another, I can replace them quickly, sometimes in hours. And the downside is the materials. So you've got to understand, what materials you should use and should not use in terms of 3D printing. For me, I use a lot of PLA, and PLA is temperature sensitive. So if you're taking photos in a hot environment during the summer, that PLA is going to change its shape. And for me, that experience led to a problem with collimation on my telescope, which took a while to figure out what the reason was. But once I understood that it was the PLA changing shape, then printed 3 more of those and popped them in, and I was good to go after collimating the telescope. So that can be a con for this, right? Where you've got to understand what's the right material to use for the application, so that you're not constantly over and over replacing those. So if you don't have a 3D printer readily available to you, that can be an issue. So just keep that in mind. And this is one of the photos I took after making that change of the Orion Nebula. Of course, I was able to go. I think these are about 30-second subs at the time, but just being able to take the picture was great, and being able to pull out the Running Man Nebula as well. So, and here's another one. This M13 one is one of my favorites. I actually put this on. I had it printed actually, and it's hanging on a wall. I like the colors that came out of that. This was done with a Canon T3i camera as well. So there's a little. I did upgrade, like I said. I went to Chuck and I bought a camera from him because he was so nice in helping me out. And of course, I've got another Andromeda photo here as well as comparison. And one of my favorites, the Pleiades. Tried this with my smartphone, and I could not get any of that dust to show up at all. I can get the stars; that was no problem, but it was really nice to be able to get the dust that surrounds this cluster of stars and get that to show up in the photo. Stars aren't perfect in this photo, but I still like it. I was able to make an improvement, from where I was to where I am at that point in time, to do both Bodes and Cigar Galaxy as well. All right, so I'll pause there. Any questions come up so far before I move on?
No questions yet, but it looks like a number of the people that are watching on YouTube have experience and really enjoy their 3D printers.
And
Okay, good.
And one of them knows Chuck too, at the camera store.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
you're making memories for people out there.
Awesome. Good. Then hopefully others are making memories as well for themselves, their families, and friends. This hobby can do a lot of that for you, right?
Actually, Kevin, a question came in just at the moment we said there are no questions.
Okay.
So Beatrice asked, do you use only PLA, or do you use other stuff that might have, other properties that are more suited?
So I printed in PETG, PLA, and some Ninja Tech Cheetah, which is a TPU filament. It's kind of soft, so I use that filament, the TPU, for like rubber grommets or things like that between the rings on that's holding my telescope together, so it doesn't scratch the telescope, because it's soft and it's malleable. PLA, it prints so nicely and so so easily that I'm sort of stuck with it in that regard because of that ability, and I don't mind printing things over and over again because it doesn't take me long to reprint them if I need to. The PETG, I've tried it and I've not been totally successful printing with it. My printers actually don't like it, or at least the ones that the filament that I purchased, it didn't like it too much. So I still got some learning to do with the PETG, which should be a lot less temperature sensitive. But I haven't grown yet there yet. So.
Is there any material that's really rigid and strong and can take the stresses that you need for, say, an adapter?
Okay, so for an adapter, those are, well, it depends on the type of adapter. If you've got one that's threaded, 3D printing threads is going to be difficult. One of the, so it's not necessarily a material thing, it's a capability of the printer thing. If you've got lots of money, you can go to some companies and they'll give you access to their very, very expensive 3D printers that may come very close to 3D printing threads on those adapters. But what I've done is I've actually heated up the 3D printed piece, and as well as heating up the mating part, which is metal in this case, and put the two together and let them cool. And when they cool, the threads actually get applied to the 3D printed piece. It works. It's not always consistent, but it works well enough to be usable. Now, as far as really strong materials, there's a lot of different materials that are actually available. There's combination materials, which I can't tell you the name off the top of my head right now. There's Teflon that's available. There's ABS, which is actually a really good filament to print with, but it can be a little bit smelly to print. It's a nice way to put it. So, and I've not used any of those filaments yet. And I say yet because I think at some point I'll give those a try. So there are a lot of different filaments available. Cost-wise, they get to be a little more expensive than PLA. PLA is about $40 for 1 kilogram or a roll of filament. So, and that's that's a good number. And then they start to go up from there for the different types of materials. So my experience may be a little bit limited, but I think in April, I think we'll get a pretty good show on that.
Terry just made a comment that polycarbonate is reasonably strong material to use for,
Yep.
Or PCCF.
Okay, I'll have to look into that one. Thank you
All
for
right.
that suggestion.
I think we need a whole show on 3D printing. It just seems like there's an awful lot of little parts that is hard to get ordered because we just don't know exactly how to explain what we want. But if we were printing them ourselves, we'd know how to do it.
Absolutely. And if you're adventurous enough to do that, right, to sit down and design what you want, there's a lot of different things you can do with 3D printing. There's no limits to it. You can pretty much solve a lot of problems, whether it be temporarily or longer term, just by finding something you can 3D print. The first thing I 3D printed with my 3D printer was 4 stands to hold up a microwave that was too small to fit into the spot the other one used to be in, and it worked out great. It's still holding up now, and with my kids and my family slamming that the door on the microwave, it hasn't gone anywhere, and it's doing a great job. So
I guess the other part of that is doing the design, because obviously designing parts for astrophotography is a relatively precise thing that you have to do. So how do you advance in that area as well as with materials?
So that boils down to the choices of the items you want to print, because there's a lot of different opportunities that I've looked at and said, that's a really complicated design and print for a telescope. So right now at the most I've done focus knobs. Dual speed focus knobs are pretty straightforward to do. I've done, and I'll get into that here in a little bit, batting off masks. The holder for a polar alignment camera, I think, is probably the most complicated thing that I've printed. So I think it boils down to choice as to what you want to print and how complicated it is. And I think as you start to get in more and more into the application of 3D printing, then you'll realize, yeah, there's some limitations to what I can do right now until I get to a point where I can do a lot more. I've even 3D printed a holder for I can't. I lost my train of thought there. Coma corrector. There we go. Bought a coma corrector for my Astro V6 and it didn't fit, so I 3D printed some adapters for it, which are just some circular rings that I heated up and mated them together, and it held just fine. So
as you're an engineer, I don't know what kind of engineer, but you probably got some technical expertise in comfort around what's required for 3D printing.
Yeah, I do. I'm a mechanical engineer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so what I do get a lot of, emails or requests from others to help with. They've either bought the same telescope or a similar, and they want to use, for example, the extensions, the mirror extensions, and I've either printed them for them and mailed them out, or sent them the files where they can get it printed themselves online or with a friend or someone that they know. So I do get a fair amount of people who have said, yeah, that's a little bit complicated for me, but can you help? And I have no problems doing that.
Okay, I guess that's it for now. Go ahead.
So polar alignment. So this was a fun project, actually. I'm getting older. You guys tell me I'm sort of the youngest one on the calls, but getting older is not fun. I'll say that. And getting down on your knees and looking up through the reticle to line up your telescope to Polaris is just not fun. So I've spent a lot of time trying to get polar aligned, and that has a huge effect on the quality of your photos, how your stars look. So if you don't start with a good polar alignment, a good level telescope to begin with, there's not much you can do afterwards to fix it, other than in post processing to change your stars from whatever shape they are to something round, right? So I've spent some time trying to get better at polar aligning, and I moved into drift aligning eventually, mostly because, well, I didn't have a clear view of Polaris at the time. I had a nice view of the south and the east, so it made sense. I'll go ahead and learn how to do drift aligning and go from there. But that, for me, it took a long time to get that to line up properly, and so that was frustrating. You've got summer nights where you just have a few hours of available nighttime to deal with, because it gets dark at 8 p.m. and by midnight you're finally happy with your drift alignment that you want to start taking photos. That was a little frustrating. So it works. You can get pretty good polar alignment with that. I just found it, for me, and the type of mount that I had and the issues that come along with trying to make all of that work together, it was just a little bit frustrating to do. So if you want to you have sharp stars all the time, then I'm telling you here, just sell everything you got and get yourself a go-to mount with an auto guider. That's the best way to go. I don't have one yet, but you know, the frustrations that I've gone through just trying to get polar alignment, I don't wish that on anybody else, even if you're my enemy, for example. So, but if you're in a position where I was, where I said to myself, okay, I'm an engineer, I can figure this out. I don't have to go spend a whole lot of money. Or you want to copy what I've done, if you've got something similar, then I can send you the STL file, and you can print the holder for this camera, and you can buy the same camera that I use here. So and that's what I did actually. It took I would probably say a couple hours on Amazon.com looking for a camera that was suitable. So the one there on the left is what I purchased, and it's a simple, I think it's $50 USB camera, and then it's sort of it's mostly square. So when you're talking about designing something to 3D print for, that's a pretty good starting point. A square is pretty easy to do on a lot of these design systems. So you know, I didn't have to do any crazy shapes or anything like that to create the holder. I just put a square hole in it, and the camera fits. The only other piece that I needed to do in this, and I've got a long video on this on my YouTube channel, but I did have to figure out how to mount it within the mount itself. And so if you're looking at the top of this, there's a cutout, a little round cutout at the top, and that's actually to fit onto the screw that's in there inside of the mount for the weight. So the bar that holds the weights, that goes in the mount, and you screw that in. So that actually sits on there, so the camera will not turn. It's actually nice and tight within that hole, and it's pointed directly at Polaris. And so I did spend the $15 with SharpCap so I can do polar alignments. And now I can do a polar alignment some nights, depending upon seeing conditions, about 30 minutes to maybe 5-10 minutes, depending upon, you know, like I said, the seeing conditions. So, and I'm traveling a lot with my telescope, having moved from one state to another. So I don't have, you know, marked out ground yet. I just put my tripods here and level it all out and put everything back together. And I know I'm pretty close to Polaris at that point in time. We're very close to polar aligned. So I've got to actually do it from scratch each and every time. So in those situations, it just makes sense to have, and very quickly, it's just put it on. There's no threading or anything like that. It fits right in is snugly into the hole. Put it in, I use it, I take it off, put it away, and I leave my setup there taking pictures. So I'll pause here if there are any specific questions for that.
I think we're good. There was some chat from Beatrice about printing screwed adapters. I think you addressed that, saying you could fuse them together, but printing a perfect screw adapter is difficult.
Yeah, larger threads you can print. Even that is, you can feel, it's not very smooth. You can actually feel the layer lines that are in the 3D print. Over time, it does get smoother. So I've seen a lot of that. But if you want for the majority of what we're doing in astrophotography, you've got the really tiny, small threads, and your 3D printer is just not going to be able to get those for you. Okay, so the background tonight is this Crescent Nebula photo here on the left. This is one that I took at the polar alignment setup. I've got the Western Veil Nebula as well as an example with that change. All right, so sort of feel like I'm moving pretty quickly through. So how am I doing on time?
You're fine on time. We're a visiting group, and you're okay.
Okay. All right, so the next one, this is a fun one for me. RRT, or the Rapid Response Robotic telescope. This is a telescope that is owned by Norfolk State University and is managed by the University of Virginia on Fan Mountain in Charlottesville. And my friend here in the picture on the left, his name is Tom Epps. He and I met while volunteering at the Virginia Living Museum. He's a really good guy. And he's taught me a lot about astronomy as well. And so wanted to shout him out. But he called me, he contacted me and said, "Hey, I got tickets to the Fan Mountain Observatory in April, and do you want to go?" I said, "Sure." It's in Charlottesville, and it's April, and UVA's men's basketball team just won a national championship. Who would say no to that request as a University of Virginia graduate? So I jumped on that. And so we went. It was a really cold night. Of course, we get there, and the one enemy of every astronomer, whether it's visual or astrophotography, those clouds were out. And so we didn't get a chance to actually see anything with the telescopes, but it was good to get in there and take pictures. Touring, and we're looking at those. Dr. Murphy, who is the gentleman there on the right, we met him, and he said, "Hey, we've got this robotic telescope. You guys, want to take a look?" So went there and took a look at that, and what you see here on the left. And I said, "This is nice." He said, "You want to use it?" And I said, "Sure." So again, you offered me something I wanted to do. I couldn't say no. And so I left that entire experience with a lot of different pictures, a lot of different photos, a lot of memories, and the ability to utilize this telescope from my couch. And so the opportunity there that I looked at was, well, I don't have the money for narrowband imaging, but I have access to this telescope, which has narrowband filters and the ability, a large 24-inch mirror. It can take a lot of different photos. I will learn, and I will make mistakes, and I will see, what I can do with narrowband imaging. And Ed was like, "Yep, that's great. Use it a lot. We just want to get some press out there for it, and send me your pictures so I can show people what you can do with this telescope." And so with that, here are some samples of what I was able to take with that telescope, which is, of course, better than anything that I own today. M13. I posted this one online and got a lot of positive feedback on it, which was surprising. I thought there's no color at this at all. But I did get a lot of good feedback on that one. Cocoon Nebula. I'll come back to that one because there's a bit of a exciting story to that one, I guess I could say. Whirlpool Galaxy was the first picture I took with it, and I thought this came out pretty good. Again, I not knowing what to do or how to do the photography with the different filters, I was learning. So again, I thought that was pretty good in the Pinwheel Galaxy. That was actually several different attempts at the Pinwheel Galaxy because I couldn't get the red the hydrogen alpha to show up, and it took a while to figure that out. But combining HA03S2 into one photo, major challenge for me. Even with YouTube videos and seeing other people do it, it just didn't work for me all that well until I did this Cocoon Nebula photo, and I think I fell out of my chair when I finally combined the three images, and it came out looking like it was supposed to at that time. And it was, I think I was running around with my hands up. Hey, I did it finally, because it's challenging, I think. And having done this for 3 years now, I think up to this time, 2 or 3 years, to learn the different techniques and how to take a photo and take a nice photo, in the different ways of doing that, it can be challenging for an individual. So I was absolutely excited with this Cocoon Nebula, so much so I had to make a photo of that one as well. So as you can tell, I get excited with a lot of my photos, and if you love this hobby, I think you do as well.
Kevin, can you tell us a little bit more about the robotic telescope, focal length, the camera that's used?
Now you got me here. So focal length is, I want to say, over 2,000 millimeters, but it is a 24-inch mirror. It's a Ritchie Crichton telescope. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. It's got an S big, and I don't remember the model number, but an S big camera on it, and a large filter wheel with the different filters on it. The local astronomy groups in the Hampton Roads area also have access to this telescope. And so I guess a good point to say here is if you're part of your local astronomy groups and they have access to a telescope, a robotic telescope like this, certainly, joining those groups and getting access to those telescopes gives you the opportunity to do things like this. Hold on one second, I need a sip of water. So you can search RRT for more specifics on the telescope. It's mostly used by the students, of course, and so you can, if you're able to or live in the Tidewater area, any of the groups that have access to the scope, just know that your priority probably be second to the students there. Yeah. Hopefully that explains enough about the telescope. I apologize, I don't know or off the top of my head the focal length, and I probably should, but I'm drawing a blank on that one right now. Okay, I didn't say anything about those pictures, but they're further examples of that telescope. All right, so I'm going to summarize. So, because you're probably wondering, what do I have? I've spent in the first 4 years of this hobby somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000, and I don't know if my path through this hobby is similar to others. I'm guessing it probably is, especially if you're going from visual to astrophotography. You're probably spending a lot of money going from one telescope or camera or mount or something, one thing to another, to get to where you want to go. So for me, I've kind of limited that. I was able to acquire a couple of different telescopes, either used or through an estate sale, for example. So they came quite inexpensively to me. I told you about I did pay the $200 for that Canon T3i, as well as I bought the Orion AstroView telescope mount, and filters and eyepieces, all brand new, to begin this process for me. So that's the equipment that I have, which has taken the majority of the photos. I typically do deep sky with the Orion AstroView or the Orion ST80, and then I now have focused this Meade ETX on planetary and sometimes solar astrophotography. Because for those, you're going to need the extra focal length, and that 1900 millimeters of focal length there is pretty useful for that side of it. All right, so to close, I got a few more pictures to show you, and then I could take some more questions. So over here is Comet Neowise. For me, this was a challenge to capture last year. It certainly it took me a while to get in. I got it right as it was leaving our solar system. So I was happy to be able to do it at that time. But every night that I went out to try to capture a picture of Neowise and its all its glory and its bright long tail that I was seeing all over the internet, I was not fortunate enough to do so. There was either clouds in the way, or otherwise. There were a few people who were living in the Tidewater area of Virginia that were able to see it, but I was not successful to do it until probably almost a week later, and I took that ST80 to Fort Monroe, set it up, and I was able to see it actually through the telescope, of course, because it had dimmed significantly by then. And then I took some pictures with my Canon T3i. Venus, one of the more popular pictures that I do take, because it's so bright and so visible. It's kind of hard to miss. So every once in a while, I just turn my telescope to it and pop a photo or two. And then of course the M13 picture that I took as well that I showed you earlier. And then I sort of jumped into the rabbit hole a little bit in 2020 and spent some money on cameras. So each and every step that I took, I saw an improvement in the quality of my photos. And of course, I do get the responses sometimes. Oh, you should have bought all of this up front, and you would have not spent as much as you spent. That's a true statement. But being the person that I am, who likes to do some things just because, meaning I have a 3D printer and I can 3D print something. I can program, so I bought a Raspberry Pi, so I can do some things just because I can, and I can share my experiences with others, and if it helps, it's great. So my path, I think, is I'm okay with my path, but I did spend a bit of some money. Got that QHY 163C, which is turning out to be one of the sort of my workhorse camera now. I really like the quality of the photos that I get with that. I was gifted the ASI 183 MC Pro camera, and that one I have not gotten too much out of it yet. The first one I got, it broke. I had to send it back, and because of COVID, it took a long time to get the replacement. So I still have to make some progress with that camera. And then, of course, I did get a Raspberry Pi, and its main function right now is to wirelessly transfer the photos from the camera to my laptop, especially in these cold nights now where I can sit in my car with the heat running, and I can still see on my laptop the quality of the photos that are being taken. That worked out great. That turned out to be a pretty good investment of about $80 in total to make that work. And so with that, some photos that were taken with that total setup with the QHY. The Jupiter photo is done with the ASI 183 MC Pro, but everything else you see here was done with the QHY. If you're concerned about some of the colors you see here, yeah, I still have some work to do on my post-processing skills. But again, I'm happy with like if you're looking at Pac-Man Nebula, for example, I am happy that I'm able to get the detail I was able to get. I can continue working on my post-processing skills to get those colors right. Triangulum Galaxy is one that I didn't spend a lot of time trying to understand how to photograph properly. I just gave it a try, and I think that came out okay. There's some more work to do to make that better. And Western Veil Nebula, I think, is one of my favorites now, just because of all the different colors you see in that photo. And get my mouse working here. There we go. your other photos. Crescent Nebula, drove to Asheville, North Carolina to capture. It was sort of a weekend getaway, and so it went up to the mountains. I think it's a Bortle class 4 3 zone, and one of the Asheville members, Asheville astrophotography or astronomy group members met me out there, and so I was able to get this photo while there. I have the 2020 conjunction photo, which, by the way, is 24 hours after the conjunction. The night of the conjunction, I actually had a equipment malfunction, I'll call it that, which turned out okay, because while there, a family was doing the same thing. They wanted to see the conjunction. They were out with their binoculars, and so it turned into an outreach opportunity for me. And we had a really great night looking at the conjunction and talking about space and science. And the younger kids were really involved in the conversation, and so having not taken a photo that day, I'm not too upset about it. I was able to get it the next day, which is what you see there. And finally, the Wizard Nebula. This one I thought was a bit of a stretch to go after, but I was able to. It's a decent photo, so I was able to get that, and I'm happy with that. And so this is my last slide, so I'll close here with a few more pieces. On the left-hand side, you see how you can find me on Google or YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. But I do want to mention, because I've said a lot and I haven't really talked about the software that I've been using in too much detail. So I'm listing it here as to what I use to create the photos. Again, with my mobile phone, it was camera FV5. PIP was used mostly for, and Registax for the solar system photos. Astrophotography tool was used for a lot of the deep sky stuff. Star Tools, deep sky editing. I actually learned how to use it by watching one of the shows on this channel on Star Tools. I like GIMP, but I like it mostly because it's free. I will, I guess, eventually purchase some software to do a better job of editing my photos. Deep Sky Stacker is also free. WinGPOS, SharpCap, Stellarium. Stellarium is the app that I think a lot of people use. It's very good to tell you, what you're looking at, where it is in the sky. And one of the important parts of my journey that I wanted to maintain was to be able to learn the night sky, so that and what's one of the reasons why I never did buy a go-to mount, because I want to be able to look up, see what I'm looking at, and be able to point my telescope directly there. And Stellarium is part of helping me learn the night sky well enough to be able to look up and point and turn and adjust my telescope to see what I need to see and find all these objects. And then I do some plate solving within astrophotography tool to frame it all up. So support for a lot of the techniques and softwares that I did mention, you can find them all over the internet just by searching them. Cloudy Nights is one good spot to go to. Of course, YouTube and this channel and others are good places to go. I've said before, and I'll just kind of sort of repeat it here. I do have a long way to go when it comes to my acquisition and post processing. But for me, I'm happy because I'm able to do it. Period. If I wasn't able to do it, I think I wouldn't like the hobby, right? And I'd probably be doing something else. So every time I'm able to get a photo, whether it's perfect or not, I'm really excited and happy about it. So I do want to close in saying, remember, the sky is only the limit when your mind is unwilling to fly. So go beyond. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks, Kevin. That was great. I think you kind of mirrored the experience that a lot of us had when we started out looking through a telescope, tired of fuzzy objects, and then moving up the ladder for taking pictures one way or another. Linda actually asked probably a nice question to kind of sum a little bit up. What do you plan to do and what are your goals for this year?
So this year, I'm still actually trying to figure that out, because I did spend some money on those cameras. So I think I'm going to spend a bit of some time, getting to better at using them, setting them up for the different types of acquisitions that are available to me. So I've got 3 different telescopes, right? And the sensor size matters, and I'm still trying to piece all of that together. So I think I'll spend some time with that. I do have a project thought in mind to create a go-to mount from scratch by buying the motors and maybe using an Arduino board, but that's a really advanced and probably a long project that may or may not get taken care of this year. But I'm also interested in helping others who may be interested in what I've done, and it may fall in line with what they want to do. So I do spend a little bit of time, or I would like to spend more time this year helping others, be able to take some photos with their cameras. So that's mostly YouTube videos, I think is going to be the main piece for this year for me.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I think we've had a lot of comments, a lot of people appreciating what you're doing and stuff like that. For me, I got to echo what Eric said very eloquently. He said that you've gone through what a lot of us have gone through. Yeah, but not everybody of us managed to snag a 24-inch RC with a S-Big camera on it. And that was kind of fortunate, and have somebody give us a QSI, or not a QSI, but a ZWO camera and stuff like that. So, hey, look, the reason I asked you to come on here was because I found you on the internet there, and I said, whoa, this guy's done a lot in a short time, and he's done it differently than a lot of other people have done. And I just thought these make for some of our best stories. We are part of a hobby here, and it's good to hear from others. I think back on some of our most popular programs have been from people who have had a story like yours. They really love the hobby. They like doing it. I know there are other
Yep.
people out there that are like that, and I wish I could get them to share their stories and share their expertise. Kevin just gave us a real good program, and he said, "Hey, look, I'm not the most wonderful processor. I don't have the fanciest equipment, and all the other stuff." But he gave us an important program that I think we all learned something from, and we certainly enjoyed.
Oh, thank you, and that's the to me the biggest piece, to be able to help others, and hopefully by doing this tonight and others looking at this video maybe later, we'll be able to help them in their journey as well.
Okay. The screen display that's on YouTube right now has whoever's talking as the main part of the screen, and then over the side you can see you can see the different people in the room. And I had my camera on at the time, and I was just kind of listening and shaking my head. And then at one point I go, "Whoa!" With the part where you hit that you're going to make your own go-to mount. That part that woke me up right there. I mean, it was like so if you're wondering, if you've been watching those little panels on the side and you saw my head go, "Whoa, what was that?" That was that part. You got to understand that the sound that we get when we're in the room here is spaced about 30 seconds away from what you see on the screen. So sometimes when we're reacting, our facial expressions, we're reacting about something that you're going to hear about in about 15 to 30 seconds. So that's what I just thought it was funny to see that. Anyway, Kevin, thank you very much. Eric, is there anything else we need to do? Molly, Terry?
No, I think we're all set.
Okay.
I was just going to mention that I only have the side panel with all the videos when we're kind of talking at the end and stuff like this. During the presentation, I only have the speaker on the side.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But
Kevin, when we leave the air, you can stay with us for a little bit and chat.
Sure.
Adam's going to come next week. Adam Block is going to come next week and tell us about things we can screw up in Photoshop and how we can save time and energy with that. Molly?
Fix and site. Fix and site.
Oh,
Right?
Are we ready to go?
Yeah. I
Okay,
can take it
Molly,
back.
you're in charge. Take us out. See you next
Alrighty.
week, everybody.
Thank you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye.